If you've ever worked for tips, you know that feeling, right? You look at your paycheck and you just wonder, is this right? Am I actually being paid fairly? Well, today, we're going to get you some clear answers. We're breaking down the official federal rules for tipped employees, and we're going straight to the source, the Department of Labor's own fact sheet.
You know, it's a huge question for millions of people working in the service industry, and let's be honest, the rules can feel a little tricky. So, let's dive in and make sure you walk away with the clear, straightforward answers you need. So, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the absolute basics, build a solid foundation. Then, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of things like tip credits and tip pools. We'll cover the specific rules for everybody involved. And most importantly, we'll talk about how you can protect your rights.
Okay, first things first. Before we can even talk about the money, the pay rates, the credits, all that stuff, we have to figure out who these rules even apply to. What exactly does the law consider a tipped employee?
The official definition is actually way simpler than you might think. There's a magic number, and that number is $30. If you regularly, month after month, make more than $30 in tips, then boom, you are officially a tipped employee in the eyes of federal law. That's the key that unlocks everything else we're about to talk about.
All right, let's tackle the big one. This is the concept that causes the most confusion, the tip credit. It's basically how your employer can legally pay you a cash wage that's less than the federal minimum wage. So how on earth does that work? Let's break down the math.
Think of it this way. The tip credit is the portion of your own tips that your employer gets to count toward their legal obligation to pay you minimum wage. It's a whole system that really just boils down to three key numbers. First up, we have the foundation of this whole thing, the federal minimum wage. Right now, that's $7.25 per hour. No matter what, your total pay, that's your cash wage plus your tips, has to average out to at least this amount.
Next, you've got this number, $2.13 an hour. This is the absolute floor. It's the minimum cash wage your employer must pay you directly out of their own pocket, regardless of how much you make in tips.
And this last number, well, it's just the result of some simple subtraction. It's the full minimum wage, that's $7.25, minus the cash wage of $2.13. So your employer can claim up to $5.12 an hour from your tips to help them meet their minimum wage obligation. Now, here's the most important part of this whole equation. This is the safety net. If you have a really slow week and your tips, plus that $2.13 an hour, don't add up to at least $7.25 an hour, your employer is legally on the hook to pay you the difference. You are always guaranteed to make at least the full minimum wage.
So how does this all play out in the real world? Well, an employer can't just wake up one day and decide to take a tip credit. Nope. To do it legally, they have to follow a very specific set of rules. And these rules are all designed to protect you. This is absolutely critical. Before taking a tip credit, your employer is legally required to tell you 5 things. They have to tell you the cash wage they're paying you, the amount of the tip credit they're claiming, and they have to make it clear that the credit can't be more than the tips you actually get. They also have to tell you that you keep all your tips, unless there's a valid tip pool. And finally, they ask to tell you that they've told you all these rules. If they skip any of these steps, they can't legally take the credit. Period.
And here's a great little example of just how specific these rules can get. You know when a customer tips on a credit card? Well, your employer can pass that little processing fee on to you. So if the credit card company charges a 3% fee, they can reduce your tip by 3%. But they cannot take a single penny more than what the credit card company actually charges them.
Okay, let's talk about sharing tips, because tip pooling is super common, but it's not a free-for-all. The rules for who can actually be in the tip pool, well, that depends entirely on whether your employer is taking a tip credit.
So it all boils down to one simple question. Is your employer taking a tip credit or not? If they are taking a tip credit, meaning they're paying you that lower cash wage, then the pool can only include other front-of-house staff, servers, bussers, bartenders. But if they pay everyone the full $7.25 minimum wage directly, then they can include back-of-house staff like cooks and dishwashers in that tip pool.
All right, this is a big one. It's one of the most important rules, and honestly, one of the most frequently broken. So let's be crystal clear on this.
The answer is a flat, simple, absolute no. Full stop. It doesn't matter what your cash wage is. It doesn't matter what kind of tip pool you have. Just no.
And listen, that's not just my opinion. This is a direct quote from the Department of Labor. Employers, managers, and supervisors are strictly forbidden from keeping any of your tips. Now, the only tiny exception is if a manager, say, serves a whole table all by themselves,
They can keep the tip from that one specific table, but that's it. They can't take a cut of your tips.
Okay, so we've got over the rules. Now let's talk about what it looks like when those rules get broken. These are the red flags you really need to be watching out for.
Here are 4 major ones to keep an eye on. First up, wage shortfalls. At the end of the week, your total pay should never average out to less than $7.25 an hour. Next, illegal deductions. Your boss can't make you pay for broken glasses or for a customer who walked out on their bill. Third, overtime miscalculation. Overtime pay has to be calculated based on the full minimum wage, not that lower cash wage. And finally, improper pooling. Managers can never be in the tip pool, and neither can kitchen staff if your employer is taking a tip credit.
So, what if you're listening to all of this and a little alarm bell is starting to go off in your head? What do you do if some of this sounds familiar? Well, the good news is there are resources out there to help you figure things out. The best place to go is straight to the source. The Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division runs a totally confidential helpline. You can call them up to ask questions or even report a potential violation, and you don't have to worry about retaliation. They are the official source for information and for enforcement.
So we've covered a lot of ground, from the basic definition of who's a tipped employee all the way through the tricky parts of tip credits and pooling. The whole goal here is to give you the knowledge you need to look at your own pay stub and know for sure that you're being paid legally and fairly. So I guess the real question is, what are you going to do with this information?